Now, focusing a bit more on the novel itself and less on the background. So, how does Benzion, or as we all know him, Zaidi, manage to keep his faith throughout the events that have occurred? Because it's really interesting to us. It's a question that we've asked a lot, and as I guess you could say almost a religious podcast, we'd love to
So,
know. Well, what do you
what's
think was the
interesting,
secret
especially
behind
for our
that?
purposes here, and especially for the title of your show, is that I did ask my grandfather when he had time to be a religious person at any point in his adventure, and he said to me, I remember he looked at me with like he was incredulous. He said, pray. I'm trying to survive. I'm just trying to get to the next day. What do you mean? I got no time for religious practice. And that's another departure from the typical stories that we hear. You usually hear like, oh, they managed to find the potato and they managed to
Yeah.
light a light for the menorah on Hanukkah, or somebody managed somehow to get a pair of tefillin, and those stories are miraculous in and of themselves. But my grandfather actually put that on a complete break for 4.5 years, I think it was. And then he continued on his religious path just as soon as he
Yeah,
got home, which is kind of remarkable, and very surprising because you do not. I've never heard anything like it. I've heard of people remaining faithful. I've heard of people abandoning their faith entirely, but I've never heard of a person taking a break. That's literally what he did. He was like, I am trying to make it to the next day. I got to do this. I got to chop trees for these Russian soldiers. I just got to get myself. I got to find something to eat. I got no time for anything else.
Mm.
And that was basically his mode of life. That's what he was focused on.
yeah, because it's incredibly interesting. Because early on in his life, he was focused on studying the Torah and Talmud, and then later on in his life, he was also focused on studying the Torah and Talmud. And then in the middle, I mean, there's barely any mention of it, but it's just, I think it's very interesting how you could just take a pause instead of really having to either keep your faith throughout or just abandon
Yeah,
it entirely
I
in the
mean, you
face of the
certainly
adversary.
exactly. I didn't. I
So
didn't.
that was
I didn't
definitely
explicitly
a nice
state in the
break.
book that he took up. He was surviving. He was in the act of survival, and that's why he survived because of his focus. Break, but
Yeah,
it's evident
Yeah, but
for
just like
any
a lack
discerning
of
reader like
like,
yourself. That yes, that is what's going on. He just every day he needed to feed himself. He needed to do what he needed to do. He needed to stay out of certain people's faces, and he needed to embrace others. And that was part of it. It was a survival strategy, and it
eh,
worked. And it's why I survived, and it's why I got to be here because he took a break.
during like his later years, like when you heard this story, what were his views on God
Well,
and
he was a
religion
devout
when he had time to think about it?
Hasidic Jew, and I never really got into theological matters with him, but I grew up at his side, and I took cues from him. Um, and I'm approximately as devout as he was, I suppose. Um, I learned, as Yogi Berra said, I observed a lot by watching from him. He was a guiding light. We never really got into um, deep theological discussions. He just acted and lived, and showed by example.
You see,
very interesting.
yeah.